Mr. Sandman, bring me a dream. Make him the cutest that I've ever seen. Give him two lips like roses and clover, and tell him that his lonesome nights are over. Sandman, I'm so alone, don't have nobody to call my own. Please turn on your magic beam. Mr. Sandman, bring me a dream.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Nox Mente. Tonight's guest is Radagast. You know him and love him from his ModWiz 125 channel. Host of the... forgot your show's name. Mystic what? Mystic Brew, yes, thank you. Host of Mystic Brew and your pal and ours, Radagast. Welcome, Radagast.
Yes.
Hello, Jerry and Spec, and to anybody who's tuned in to the show right now.
We're so like on time and early, no one's expecting us to even be on, I think. It's just my opinion.
Oh.
So
We knew it could only get better from here. I mean,
yeah,
we're
actually on time this week. Last week we were half an hour out.
We had a no-show.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Like sound levels? No one's here.
Oh, I got it fixed.
Nobody's here. Okay.
Oh, one watching, and that's me.
Yeah, because everyone might be at my channel.
I know this is the thing with our new channel is, I don't know if it popped. Does your channel send out an alert, Jerry?
Yeah, if you sign up for it.
Yeah, I mean, the way I just logged, went on to the show itself was I got my email, I clicked on it, and opened up because I like to follow the live chat just in case.
I like to too, except for when I'm talking, it seems like it drops me out. So lately I've been deciding not to check. Although that is where so much of the fun's happening. I think. I do think that usually it seems like this is what Moose gets right, is he just waits until people get here. But we do try to keep it timely. So
but I can always pull it and edit it and put it up on my channel, or I'll link it on my channel.
Yeah. Anyway, so this is going to be a fun interview. We love Radagast, and I think I listen to everything you do, including the Moose and the Mystic stuff, which I love.
Yeah.
So let's just jump in and give us a sense of the world you grew up in.
Okay. I grew up in New York City in the borough of the Bronx, and I was there until I was 30 years of age. So that's a little over half my life ago. The Bronx wasn't like living in Manhattan. There were a lot more parks. There were streets that had some private houses on my street, along with a couple of apartment buildings. The Bronx was an interesting place. It didn't get the reputation that the legendary reputation has for being. It was a rugged place at one level, but it was very neighborhoody. It's just very spirited individuals. And so
in my view of it, is always like kind of concrete jungle-ish, lots of buildings, but neighborhood parks too.
Yeah, we had trees on our street. We had some sycamore trees. They were pretty good size, almost as tall as the buildings, the 5-story buildings. So they, during the summer we had shade on one side of our street. But I tell you, that seems like a very long time ago. I'm just glad I grew up there largely because it gave me street smarts.
Yeah.
Street smarts you can bring anywhere with you.
That's a real treasure, actually. It's some of the gold in life.
And also, once you've grown up in the city and those unique, nuanced social skills, parallel parking, New driving in Manhattan, those are skills that you are unlike being in almost any other place in the world. They're skills I'd rather not have to use on a daily basis, or maybe never again, but I'm glad I developed them. There was a lot of utility to growing up in an environment that required you to stay situationally aware.
Was there any connection to nature for you, like actual nature?
Yeah. Well, largely because we had St. James Park, which, everything was walkable. Actually, the church I went to was St. James Church, which is right next to St. James Park. And so, I mean, there was plenty of nature. Plus, we weren't that far from Yonkers, and once we were driving, we could be in Yonkers like, in 20 minutes. And for us, from the Bronx, Yonkers was like the country.
Yeah.
And so I was actually, one of the things I do remember, whenever we would go like to picnics and stuff like this, one of the problems, especially people who would occasionally invite me along with their families, one of the biggest complaints was I always disappeared for a while. Because as soon as I got into nature, I would just kind of go down a trail and lose myself in it. I didn't get lost. I would lose myself in nature. I could find my way back, but nature was a lot more interesting than the people I came to the park with.
Oh yeah, I can totally relate to that. Did you? So, I mean, staying there until you were 30. I mean, this is more than just your formative years. This was a huge chunk of your life, as you said, about half. So, give us an idea of. You gave us this little bit of religious stuff. Where did obviously I think your ideas of religion have changed knowing you. So did that happen in this setting or was it later?
No, I was an altar boy.
Oh my.
So, and I had spent 5 years. You start with a black cross, then you work up to a gold cross, and then at the 6th year you get like a red cape. Well, I got
cape. I'm learning more about the Christian church every week. I'm on a red cape.
So, well, it's a demi cape, and like kind of like a little over the shoulder type thing. And so, as an altar boy, you get to hang out with the reverends. We had 2 reverends in our church. One was a little approachable. They were both approachable. One was funny, and the other was a really nice man, but as dry as a desert wind as far as humor goes. And but I got to ask them, we're going over there, I'm listening to their sermons. So I had questions. And I started asking those questions. And their answers, frankly, sucked. Their answers were lame at best. Well-meaning, but there was too many contradictions. And when you ask them to resolve a contradiction, instead of resolve, you got basically learned apologetics. Like apparently there's a whole part of theology that's about replying to critics, pointing out the stuff in biblical text that doesn't add, like logically or in other ways doesn't add up. So there's a whole apologetics kind of branch of theology. So basically that's kind of, what I'd get my answers, then I would have questions to their answers, and then I would get the equivalent of apologetics. So I left the church completely.
How old were you around that time?
Let's see. I was 14 or maybe 15.
Oh, okay. So early on.
Yeah. Well, one of the reasons I was in the church and altar boy was I was profoundly spiritual. So, you kind of grow up in this thing and you're looking around within the system that you're put into. And, you're looking around. It's kind of like going to a store and finding shit that just won't be on the shelves. Mm-hmm. Because some of the things you want are heretical. So, I was really coming from a very sincere place of seeking. and they just couldn't provide a road for me. I mean, basically, you know, you kept on saying there's got to be more to this road. No, there isn't. And then when they pulled the curtain back, there was a wall. The road led to a wall, basically.
Yeah.
So I guess initially I was agnostic. Went into atheism. That lasted for a couple of hours of my life, maybe a few days. And then I picked up a book called The Third Eye, written by, his name was Lobsang Rampa. And it was the first time I'd ever heard about astral traveling. I'm getting into.
Oh, yes. Yes.
And just and reincarnation.
Yes.
And a non-angry God.
Imagine that.
Yeah, somebody, I mean, a God that actually seemed like they could actually command respect. And instead of the God that I was given, that as I got to 14 or 15, I had emotionally outgrown that God. I considered myself its moral superior.
Mm-hmm.
Which is, you know, that's a strange formula. But once I got introduced to, you know, the Tibetan concept, which is a fairly, well, it's funny, the Tibetan Buddhists definitely have more of a defined God concept than Buddha. I mean, when I you know, look at some of the things of Buddhism, I find Buddhism a way of realizing, okay, the world has been taken over. These are our coping mechanisms. I mean, to me, Buddhism is like the coping religion.
Yeah.
We don't really have any answers. We don't, you know, but you know, there's virtues to do. There's paths. You know, making lemonade from lemons. You know, I mean,
Yeah.
you know, useful stuff. But you know, to me, it's not a deep system.
I don't remember where I heard this, but I do recall someone saying that Buddhism, out of all the religions, Buddhism was the least fucked with.
Yeah, because it was so innocuous to begin with. It kind of, I mean, don't forget, it came out of Hinduism. It came about the time that Hinduism was going through its change, going from a religion of antiquity to a religion that was now showing the male domination of the priesthood that was becoming part of the ancient world at that time. And noticeably, it's only about 2,000 years ago, I mean, a little bit more around Buddhist time, that the caste system started.
Yeah, there wasn't the Piscean Eon.
And one of the real red flags of the caste system is that there's a warrior caste right underneath the Brahmin caste. So now you're systemizing war by having a warrior caste. I mean, there were warriors in all the, you know, the ancient, you know, mother-based societies, but they weren't for organized warfare. They were the immune system of the tribe, you know, and if some indignities, you know, you could respond to indignities and, you know, other stuff, but nobody organized, got the whole state, you know, all of the produce goes to the army, you know, I mean, so to me, the Buddhism arises about the time the world is starting to really flip. We're going from the ancient kind of goddess-based world into this very patriarchal world, and it's starting to show up everywhere. And to me, Buddhism is this kind of like fence-sitting religion.
Which was perfect for you coming out of Catholicism.
It was.
Well, it seems like it. I mean, you come out of
Anglicanism. I was wholly Catholic, not Roman Catholic.
Okay.
Usually,
and again,
when people spring out of their first religion, they just go, you know, equal and opposite in the other direction.
Well, he did go agnostic and atheistic at first.
Yeah, and and around 17, I picked up magic, did a little investigate. You know, somebody had a record of a black mass, and I'm like, this is goofy. I mean, I really thought it was goofy.
What
do you recall the black? Was it like? I mean, there's so many.
You didn't play much Dungeons and Dragons, did you?
It was a bunch of, from what I recall, it was a bunch of Catholic liturgy said in reverse. Ooh,
oh, okay, yeah.
Ooh, yeah. I'm so scared. It's so nasty. Right. It's so evil.
Right. Well, it's like the dirty, like to make you feel all.
It just feeds Jehovah's dark side.
Yeah, to me, it's kind of, you know, a formalized tantrum of sorts.
Mm-hmm.
But when my world really turned around when I was at 17 or 18, I read Seth Speaks. That's when things started getting clearer. Now, a lot of really, really, really good metaphysical and spiritual information is in the many, many books. In retrospect, again, I see how a lot of these channeled works have, they're not what they appear to be. For all the good information I got, one of the things that Seth didn't tell me was about Sophia. See, I have a criteria. Anything that leaves out the consciousness of our planet is hiding something. Because you can't be in this thing of all off planet and be in possession of all this knowledge, and somehow you don't know this, or else you grew. I mean, it's just kind of weird. So part of the way I parse out a lot of my information these days is not what's in it, but what's not in it.
Oh yeah, that's in the negative space.
Well, it's because what they're not providing. Because if the most important part of the story, of our story, is not in the story, then the story is just jerking us off. It's entertainment. It might even have lots of good stuff, but it's like having all these appliances and you don't know what the socket in the wall looks like. And you need to know what that socket is, and you need to know what it looks like so you can plug into it.
So in this, what sign are you, by the way?
I'm an Aquarius with Scorpio rising.
And your moon?
Gemini.
Okay, nice. Huh. Okay, so we've got this transition down. Did you at any point take psychedelic drugs as a means to access altered states?
Sadly, at that time, no. I've probably taken LSD about 500 times.
Yeah, but it was later.
No, that started like when I was around 17, during that same period. But I hadn't connected the two. Plus LSD is like going on those same paths that psilocybin and the other ones will take you, but you don't have a guide. LSD is no guide.
So you were taking it basically like socially.
At that point in the beginning. I mean, I guess you could say I was exploring consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I didn't have the ground. I didn't have enough of a map. I mean, it's kind of like driving around a country that you don't know where you are. When you go there with a kind of a map, a little bit of a map, a little bit of a compass, makes a big difference.
So when was the first time through a psychedelic, and what was it that where you actually got a sense of real altered states of consciousness, or a break out of this that we're in, a sense of that at least?
It was kind of meditative and trance states that broke down the walls for me.
Oh, nice. Were you older at that point?
For somebody who makes it a point not to think of time.
Yeah, I know. I'm just trying to get a timeline too.
I'm trying. Well, okay. I guess the real breaking point was at 35, when I quit being a very active alcoholic. I started becoming a real, like, kind of drinking every day, all day, around 21, 22, and that behavior continued until I was 35.
Which is rather common, actually.
Well, also I was a musician.
Yeah,
and
even more so.
I played bars, and they gave you booze for free.
Yeah, I know. I'm a longtime bartender.
And and as
drink up, boys and girls.
I have both Irish, Scottish, and French blood in me. I'm a genetic alcoholic, and my capacity to hold my liquor was legendary. Even the Irish would go, "I know, look at how this guy can drink." It's
Oh,
the
wow.
7th pitcher of beer I've given him in 2 hours, and look, he's still standing. And it was really kind of funny. Yeah, I'm standing. Please don't bump into my liver.
Oh my goodness.
So it was around. So anyway, at 35, 6 months after I quit drinking, I started. I had never been through it, so I didn't understand. I was kind of going through a Kundalini rising, but it was done at a chakra at a time. And I didn't, at this time, I hadn't even begun my studies, didn't know what the chakras were. But I noticed I had I was getting breakthroughs at a certain level of information. And then all of a sudden, that would kind of create a breakthrough to another level that came with another set, which created another breakthrough. And of course, I didn't know there were 7 chakras. So I was having breakthrough. Then all of a sudden, I just broke out the top of my head.
Oh, nice.
And I went into an exalted state that lasted a few weeks, 2 weeks almost exactly. I mean, where everything, I mean, the stars were there for you. I mean, the trees were saying hello to you as you walked by them. I mean, it was very, very magical. But the interesting thing, there was a book, Kundalini, what's the word? Enlightenment or psychosis. And,
right.
And basically both.
Yeah. Well, I was wondering what the people around you thought during those few weeks that you were in this state, if you had gone manic or neurotic or even psychotic.
Well, the thing was, because it was a week or so before I got there, they were, because, I was living with 2 other people. And so they were my bandmates. So I was sharing with them some of these breakthroughs. So they knew I was going through something. So when I kind of get the other side, everybody basically people gave me lots of room. Because, I might have been psychotic, but I wasn't violent. I was just nuts. And nuts and didn't know it. But once it broke 2 weeks later, and then I got to look back at the whole thing. I mean, look, when you first wake up, you have so much more going on than anybody around you. There might be people in other states or another city or another town, but as far as who's around you, you're like another kind of being.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, a lot of the early heavy spiritual enlightenments or Kundalini risings often come with a short stage of, am I the new Messiah type of stuff. I mean, it seems to come with
it. It's a common theme that God or the devil is always.
But how is that not a program or, a byproduct of a Christian upbringing?
Oh, I'm quite sure it was.
That's what I'm suggesting.
Oh yeah, I went and talked to a local Roman Catholic priest. I waited till he had time for me. When I came out and spoke to him, he couldn't believe what was coming out of my mouth. A year or so later, when I went revisited my visit, I went, you were one crazy motherfucker, man. You were really crazy at that time.
I've had one of those too.
So what was interesting about that, so that was really my big breakthrough. And that's when I kind of discovered bookstores. I've always been a big reader, but I found a new age bookstore, and these different books were talking to me. And some of them are now out of print and are gems, like the Gemstones and Vibrational Healing Volume 1 and Volume 2, the Spiritual Properties of Herbs, and
I have that.
Flower Elixirs. I mean, those are all,
yeah.
They've been out of print for a while. Every once in a while I come in print. If you see one, it might cost you $100 on Amazon. Books that cost me $10 when I bought them. So, and just for some reason, I grabbed books on Bach flower therapy, anthroposophy, all these different interesting things that got me very quickly grounded in some of the stuff that had been around for a while. And then, of course, there's also something I don't want to get into that's attached to my name, Radagast, where that comes from. That whole we'll call it parallel sourcing.
Mm-hmm.
Because during that experience for me was a joining, we'll call it. It's just, don't confuse it with walk-in. But after that experience, I wasn't the same.
Well, that's part of the point, and it's part of the goal of asking about altered states and where we go with this conversation about dreaming, dreams, past lives, deja vu, all this that Nox Mente is around. So that's perfect. That's a great great headway in without getting into the sideline of the Radagast narrative.
Yeah.
So let's get into some of the mechanisms of your dreaming experience. Like what do dreams look like for you in general? Like what's a normal dream for you? Color, sound, black and white, level of consciousness. Is there a normal for you?
No. Yeah, if I had to call, I guess normal for me is a lot more mental than emotional, although there are emotional components. I didn't practice lucid dreaming, but the interesting thing is when I was young, I had a recurring, I won't quite call it a nightmare, but it always woke me up. And that's where all of a sudden I would find myself like on the edge of a cliff, a high pinnacle, or somewhere where you can't get down.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, oh, and and I'm not, vertigo and heights kind of go together for me. And so that was a problem. And then the funny thing was I was starting this, for years, I was doing flying dreams, and you start out flapping your arms and a lot of other stuff, and you finally can fly. So then finally one time, and this is kind of like when I had a breakthrough, started of some lucid breakthrough, I'll call them, where I was in one of those places and I decided to fly off.
Oh, nice. And did you float off, or was it a flapping? What was the mechanism?
No, I just kind of, held my arms out and I just soared down. It was no big deal.
Okay.
And so flying is now something not only can I do in my dreams, I can close my eyes and fly.
Excellent. That's great.
And then the other kind of lucid thing was sometimes I'd be in a dream and something would, I don't know, like I break a plate, something would spill or whatever, and I'd find myself in the process of picking something up, and I go, wait a second, this is a dream.
Mm-hmm.
Snap your fingers, the plate goes together. Or,
Yes.
If the closet emptied out, snap your fingers and all the clothes go back in the closet. So I've kind of had those. So now I have basically where it is my dream follows its own thing. But if I fall into like hard spots in my dreams, I kind of come into the dream and realize I'm dreaming and
Excellent.
Fix the hard stuff.
Those are usually like your cues to deal with whatever's at hand and get into the now, which is lucidity, really. That's one of my definitions of it, is being in now.
Mm-hmm. Now, of course, there were certain herbal preparations that interrupt dreaming. And it was interesting because I guess I did my first astral traveling. I was either 19 or 20. And so this was before I was an alcoholic, but was a massive pot smoker. And I realized from reading that and knowing that dreams are kind of interrupted by pot smoking. You don't remember them as well. They're not as vivid. And I really wanted to get out of my body, so I quit smoking pot, which at that time was quite a thing of willpower for me. And about 2 weeks into that clean, and I started dreaming up a lot. And then finally, I feel like this kind of buzzing sound, and next thing I know, I'm down the hall from my body, and I come back in the room and I can see my body on the bed. And but I remember, and I had 2 or 3 of those experiences in the same. Again, I used this window because again, I was like, every day it's like, but So once I had my first experience, I said, okay, let's stay straight a little bit longer and see what's going. But I realized I mean, I didn't go anywhere. I just kind of, did like the local stuff. I didn't really, and I'm quite sure it's because, it's the lower astral world, but there was like a static or a background, and it was more than just something I heard. It kind of, I felt it energetically.
Like a vibration?
Vibrating, but in an irritating way.
Okay.
Well, like white noise? Or
yeah, but imagine more like a pink noise.
Yeah.
Or maybe even a little bit darker. But the noise actually had a tactile quality to it. It's like not only did I hear it, but what I was hearing, I was feeling tactily.
Sharp noise.
Yeah,
I know. I get
just
the feeling.
like just jittery. Jittery would be a good word. And so I really was didn't enjoy at least that environment, and just wasn't all that much to me. And so I went back to my normal nature habits, and maybe had one or two other experiences in my lifetime, and they were all. It's just, this is where I'm going to get to it. I like to do a lot of the work I'm going to do that's non-physical in altered states. And
could you first of all elaborate on that? So when you're saying now at this point altered states, what does that mean?
That level of attention that you slip, it's kind of like daydreaming, but maybe a little deeper, and it inserts itself. Rather, it's not. I mean, you might feed a little something, but then other things kind of get attracted to that.
So it's not with the aid of, say, a little hobbit's weed or a mushroom. This isn't a meditative. This is where you've gone into changing consciousness at will and moved into the state. Okay.
Yeah, it basically kind of starts from what I call a serious left brain. I do kind of like an active meditation where I have something I want to know. So I take it and I start playing with it logically. In other words, I use deductive reasoning to play with it. But I'm not hung up. I just want an answer. And I find that playing with something deductively, especially if I come up with a couple of all of a sudden I start getting inductive things coming into my stream. Okay, so that's not the logical mind. That's the kind of like the right, you're getting information coming in.
Right.
And so, and to me, and I don't try to move into my right brain. I want to work in tandem. So that's the whole thing, is kind of like kind of using my left brain, but in a way that it's almost calling out to the right brain because it wants answers, and it doesn't have to be logical. So when you open the gate, when you say anything, well, just give me anything, we'll deduct from whatever you give us. That opened an inductive kind of floodgate.
Can you give us an example, like a hard example from your journeys? Anything off the top of your head?
You know what? They're so ongoing. I mean, I spend almost as much of my time in that state as I do in an outer state. I mean, it's why sometimes people, I disappear. I don't engage in, like, I'm not a very messagey kind of guy or an email kind of guy. Like, I can really stay quiet. And the reason I stay quiet so much is I use all that time to be in that state.
Yeah, I hear you, and I agree. I think I'm quite similar, but I was wanting to maybe break this down for people, like in terms of an example of dealing with symbols. So a deductive process of dealing with a set of symbols. So say a scenario has popped into your head or a dream you're in, and then deducting from that as a way to invite the other side, the right brain, in and the information to come in as you sync up. Does that make sense? Where I'm looking for like hard examples for people that are going, what is he talking about?
Well, okay. Symbols don't play such a huge part. I mean, it's not that there's never any symbols. I get what basically breaks down to language or
okay,
thought.
that's fascinating.
And like, in other words, I'll get ideas to try and, because a lot of times what it is I have part of what I'm looking for, and I have these other, I'm trying to build it out.
Okay.
So I'm looking for pieces that marry into what I've already accepted as a working model that's missing pieces.
Okay. I think that's clear enough.
And so when I'm sitting there going, I need a piece. So sometimes deductively, I'll come up with something and I'll fit it in, and sometimes it works. But I get these other ideas that just seem to be given to me. And then I try them in, and a lot of the pieces to my puzzle that I get come from those altered states.
And do you think that this information that comes in is your unconscious, or is it Sophia? Is it, where do you think it's,
or even the connection you made with your connection, your mystical experience? I forgot what you called it.
Well, I mean,
that 2-week period where you were nuts.
Yeah, no, my higher self is kind of like the grand interface. So like I remember a couple of years ago when I had really gotten the big Sophian awakening. So I was trying to connect. I mean, I was already connected, but I was trying to like really, let's say, get a conversation going. And I remember one time I was outside barefoot, having a cigarette, and all of a sudden my higher self says, I have a message for you from Sophia. I said, okay. And the message was that from her that I know you want to contact me. Direct contact would ruin you. And I got all this other stuff that came. I totally understood the answer. And part of it had to do with, we always have to manage our psychology, our ego, whatever you want to call that. And kind of what I got was the extreme specialness of this kind of direct communication would probably be a lot more for me to deal with psychologically. And also the fact of the idea of having information now that you think you need to deliver, and all that kind of, I mean, tying in with messianic messenger and all. I mean, I got the picture. I mean, when I got this answer, but with this answer came like a truckload of nuanced understanding that was not in the worded message that my higher self gave me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was content with that. Now, like somebody like John Lash, okay, to me, John Lash is actually probably the most lucid speaker on really bringing back what the Sophianic narrative and what later on came to be called Gnostic. The mystery schools had their gnosis. Gnostic is a kind of a word that was more called by the mystery school people, by the now rising monotheistic type people. Kind of Gnostic kind of was like, oh, the know-it-alls. It was a pejorative to be called Gnostic, because the people who were from the mystery religions, who had gnosis as a central part of their mysteries, the outside people called them Gnostics. And then, then you had the Nag Hammadi texts that came out. You had a lot of people who were doing the interpretations who were Christians themselves. The Nag Hammadi texts are written at the very end, when the mystery schools are falling apart. They had been they had been degraded quite a bit in Greece, and I mean, when you read the Nag Hammadi stuff, I mean, you can get glimpses of the old knowledge, but everybody's confused. You can although there's a shamanic tradition and there's plenty of kind of like quote unquote magical stuff to do in a Sophianic system, the whole magical system is built on the Yahwist or Jehovah's system. And so I'm quite sure, and then you had the people who were going to the mystery schools and knew the higher mysteries. And then you had people who were going the lesser mysteries, which had a lot to do with geometry, science, astronomy, things like that. But you didn't necessarily always have the higher mysteries. That was a later, you progressed into these things. So I think what would happen is you had a lot of people who were conversant in the lesser mysteries, and now they were running into people like Kabbalists, okay? Mm-hmm. People who were practicing a magical system based on this new male god system. And look, we're naturally magical. And so so this new magical system and the angels that came with it and the powers, you start seeing, hearing, and reading all this language in what's now called Gnostic text, the Nag Hammadi text. So when I read these texts, I just see a complete mess. I see something precious coming out of the ancient world, and by the time it's being written in the 2nd century AD, it's a wreck.
Yeah.
A wreck. And but unfortunately, that's what a lot of people build their knowledge of what Gnostics are. To me, John Lash is the only person who's gone back anciently enough and understands the depth that this system goes into, because 40,000 years ago, they were making what are known as the Venuses of Willendorf, and those, the
yes.
big, okay, those weren't Venuses, those were Gaias.
Yeah.
All right. So if we're going to find a stone statue that's 35, 40,000 years of age, that's letting us know how deep into antiquity the Sophianic narrative is. The Sophianic narrative is the big secret of the ancient world that all the other religions are covering up.
And so how did you, so this information's all come to you, at least this all started out of moving through states of consciousness. Am I correct? This
Correct.
was what Sophia kind of was talking about in that first communication, was that led you into sleuthing down the path towards antiquity and into the Sophianic narrative.
Yes.
Okay, that's interesting.
Which is the narrative in so many ways. I mean, the most important of the narrative is nature, the ecosystem, and that we arose from it. We are as natural to this planet as grass and trees.
Yeah, I agree.
We fit into that. That's our system. This other system, taxes, laws, that's not our system. That's an alien system. It's not an Earth-based system.
I totally agree there too. Yeah.
I always think of it as humans are an extension of the morphogenic field of the Earth. Mm-hmm. So we're, it's all like we're the organic part, and everything else is just this overlay of mechanics.
Well, the morphogenetic fields are these beautiful, to me, repositories of a kind of species potentiality, or maybe more correctly, in certain cases, genus latencies and things. By genus and species. Just I didn't say genius. I said genus.
Yeah.
And the morphogenetic. It was really funny because I ran into the morphogenetic field for the first time reading Gemelixism and vibrational healing, and there was just a very little cursory explanation, but I got it right away. As soon as I heard the concept and he explained a little bit, I go, "Oh, damn! I see it. These packets." These packets that each species has, that as it experiences the 3D world, all that data is going into this morphogenetic field, and it was really beautiful. I mean, that's why, and it just makes so sense, especially on this planet where, because we have an aeon living with us, that although all the, I mean, the panspermia went out all over the galactic arms. It took root in thousands, if not millions of planets. Lots of bipedal human type beings arose all over the galaxy, but none of them had an aeon there. And that's why we are the focus. Not only are we the focus of the galaxy, we're the focus of the gods. We are it. Humanity is such a crux point, and a lot of it has to do with the fact that we have Sophia. That is a huge difference. And again, this is something the ancients knew.
Mm-hmm. So, all right. We braiding this into all of this, I think I want to take this right to kind of the meat of what I like to get to with the dream and dreaming stuff. So what is the state of dreaming to you? How do you see that as a function? What is it to you? And how deep or narrow is it? Are we participating in it?
And where is it?
Where is it?
Oh, where is not? I don't even know how applicable that is.
Well, I mean, as opposed to like,
I mean, because you're going to need a space-time coordinate for where.
Not that way. Not in that nature. I meant, is it a different space from, say, the astral plane or the lower astral plane? Is it a subset of that? Is it
right? Is it separate?
Is it separate? Is it your own personal virtual construction that you're in, etc.? Whatever. Those are just examples.
I like the concept, the Aboriginal concept of a dream time.
Mm-hmm.
Although that dream time is not what it used to be. Because again, once people started embracing all these other systems that are not in our dream time, but are part of the non-physical overlays, the dream time is kind of like an alternative stream of what goes on Earth. And the dream time seems to, I would say, is actually within the dreaming capacity of Sophia. Because as the Gnostics held, again, as in the holographic thing, our reality is in her dreaming, because gods create reality through dreaming.
Mm.
So we're living in her realm. And so for me, dream. Now you can leave your body. Some dreaming is astral, but some dreaming is also at this other level. Kind of like what, ayahuasca ties you into a dream time, a very earth-based dream time, and that's why they talk about Pachamama, Mama.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, there are different levels. To me, what's nice about the dream state, and most times it's not astral, is in your astral body in the astral world might as well be a physical body in many ways. So there is some care involved, especially when you're, like if you're just wandering around in your house, it's not a big deal. When you start going places, when you start really, flying around in the astral, it's kind of like going to the Bronx.
Nice wraparound.
So you're gonna want some astral street smarts. The dream time and most dreaming does not require those smarts.
Will you tell us a little bit more about the astral experience? I'm intrigued by that.
Let's get an answer to the question first.
I know. I wanted to get that in there.
Okay, what's the question again now?
What is dream space?
Yeah.
Okay. So to me, the dream space is a place for us to privately work out stuff and group work out stuff. It's really it's a place you can make really bad mistakes so bad that you wake up from them, but there's no real consequence at that time. It's kind of like playing a video game. You know what I mean? You see the health bar going down, but you don't feel any pain. So for me, dreaming is a very safe place, basically, to really do a lot of work. And since most people are kind of what we'll call like at the mercy of their dreams, let's say it allows it not to be directed by the ego or lesser parts of ourselves, you know, parts of ourselves that are a little more in tune, kind of orchestrate these scenarios. They're not, then, I mean, now the concerns of the ego can be turned into plays and stuff in the dream time for hopefully the ego to remember and to, you know, get some wisdom from that. And that was, to me, what we're missing, why sharing, why community is so important, is because, you know, after each night, you can get around a campfire. Certain people might have gone out of the body, had some experiences. Some people might have had a vision. Some people might have had dreams. And so you all get, and it doesn't, nobody says, well, did it happen in this world? Did it happen in that world? It doesn't matter, because all of these worlds converge, you know, here. It's all about us. So you're kind of bringing intel from these different fields and you share it, and you you get the message that in many ways is meant for a community. When you're living in community, the messages different parts of the message will be given to different people. Everybody might be getting the full message, but when we come back to consciousness, it's the pieces that we retain. So it's when we come together and drop all the pieces that we were able to come, and then see what we can build from those pieces, that we can kind of stay in our own unfolding story as it's happening in the causal or astral world, and then kind of either prepare for it, react to it, strategize for it. I mean, these two worlds are meant to work because we straddle two worlds. To me, it's meant to integrate the physical world. We're here for a purpose. And so for me, the information from that world is meant to inform us here. And part of it is to make this world resonate and be as close to that world as possible. And that sharing allows us to build in this world in ways. And that's where you get sacred geometry and the different, you know, temples and the ley lines that did, because they, in certain, you know, the older ones were trying to tap into the natural currents. I mean, if you had resident temple priestesses and the occasional priest, all in these different temples, and they had residents there, these were actually ways of communication also, because these people were like living in semi-altered states. You could transmit along these ley lines to the different temples. They were ways of having some pretty, like, you know, like somebody hundreds of miles away, and you want to get a message to them. One of the seers and mystics were going to the temple and send a message, and somebody at the other temples would get them.
Yeah, that's excellent.
Okay, so did I miss a question and not answer a question?
No, I'm sorry, I was ruminating. I really enjoy the image that you painted of the stories around the campfire, everyone bringing in, it's all stories that we're telling each other, and it doesn't necessarily matter where they're coming from. It's what's being contributed to the whole and what we take away individually. So I was ruminating on that a bit. Anyway, I wanted to know about your face. I wanted to know what you thought about I want this astral detail, that when you're talking about that being more serious space to where you need your street smarts, this kind of landscape that we call the astral, or
is that because it's controlled?
No, it's who. I mean, let's give a case. Like, in other words, if I were to leave my body and zoom around Floyd, Virginia, it'd probably be pretty unspectacular. If I were to leave my body and go to some like hotbed of curanderos and other brujo and bruja fuckery down in South America, ooh, now that would be a trip that you could come back with some bruises from.
And attachments, maybe.
See, the thing, like in places like, you know, especially in Amazon jungle, where you have curanderos, like almost in every other hut, and brujos and brujas, and a lot of them are not really skilled at anything other than fuckery. And these are just people who are all, a lot of it is vanity driven, ego, who's the most powerful magician, and these guys meet each other in the astral and, you know, have you know, UFC fights, you know, the equivalent of. And it's there's, like I said, there are certain magical environments in the astral world that are filled with jerks. You know, jerks leaving their body and going into the astral world. So now you have astral jerks.
So what, and this all makes sense to me, and it's definitely what a lot of people talk about. What can you do? What are some of the, what does one do?
I have another question too for that follow-up, really. Is that space also filled with thought forms of any type? Is it a create space for some?
Yeah. To me, the astral world is in many ways like our own troposphere. You know, the air is thicker closest to the surface, and as you go up, the air gets a little thinner. So a lot of the thought forms and hungry ghosts, stuff like that, that's kind of, you know, that's the thick stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You know, as you start to go a little higher in this atmosphere, a lot of the silt, the astral silt, is not there. In many ways, the lower astral world is like going into one of those neighborhood bars where you have to go down the stairs to get into the bar.
Yeah,
this could totally account for the staticky feeling too. But that's you know, if the lower astral is filled with these negative energies, that's maybe another receptor you get in astral. You could feel that, you know, if you're open to it, you can get that energetic feeling of that lower density energy.
Yeah, there's a difference between swimming in a spring-fed water hole and a scum covered pond.
Absolutely. That's another great analogy. Seriously, though, what do you, Radagast, what do you, I don't know, maybe this seems like a right turn or something, but I want to get into deja vu with all this, and what do you think deja vus are, and how do they connect into all of this other stuff that we're chewing now, all this other fodder?
Deja vu is an interesting question, because I remember hearing, I think in the last one you asked somebody about deja vu. And I've experienced it throughout my life, but I do not remember experiencing deja vu now in years. But to me, deja vu is looping of sorts. You know, again, there's all kinds of time spirals and, you know, ribbons and things, and occasionally they'll just cross, and you'll get that. And I don't think there's anything real. I mean, I guess certain deja vus could be profound. And remember, you can't put anything in an absolute box. You know, no matter what you say, you can't. It's not absolute. All you have to do is look at the yin yang symbol. Even though there's a white and a black side, each one's got a little bit of the other in it. And to me, the real signal to that is don't do absolutes. As soon as you do absolutes, you're going into bullshit territory.
Yeah, I can pull up to that. For me, though, well, right, all that territory. For me, though, I have had profound experiences with deja vus that have always been tied to a dream I had, oftentimes way back, like childhood dreams. Like I can pinpoint them, and And that's why they become so profound for me every single time. And there is a sense of being able to put, when it's like a small thin membrane of that awareness that, wow, I had this dream, I was 6 years old, and in that moment it feels as if I could push through the membrane and maybe reach something else. And so this is kind of the axis of why I'm asking everyone this is to try and, I'm trying to figure out what's going on in an open way, listening to everyone else.
Yeah, I think deja vu is a very natural thing. I think in many of the instances, it's really just kind of, again, there's these little different streams, and occasionally they just kind of come over each other. And during that period, as the consciousness that's suddenly have two streams that have almost like a duplication effect on them, you get that I mean, deja vu has a unique feeling to it.
Definitely, it's
very unique feeling.
It's one of the few strange experiences that we all seem to get. It seems kind of universal, and it's always like a nice, I feel it's always a nice surprise. It reminds me a bit, this may be interesting or telling, but it reminds me a bit of when I first discovered masturbation. Like that, the sensation is unique, and it has a transcendental effect for me. Like I could go somewhere with it. So I guess that's why I'm seeking other people. Like someday someone is gonna say, man, I pushed through to another world or something. So on that strain though, I'm wondering about your ideas of the beyond what you said earlier with the stuff that's brings you to consciousness in a dream, like the challenges or anything that may seem threatening. Do you have any ideas about what night terrors or nightmares, what the role is they play and have played for you at a deeper level, maybe more so than just your filing system, your unconscious filing system?
I mean, I really feel that terrors and difficulties are what allow me to make a lucid dreaming breakthrough.
Yeah, that's what I got earlier.
I mean, it's almost like instead of doing all that preparation to go into a lucid dream to have it, the fact is that I'm more than happy to let my dreams do what they want to do, unless they get a little wonky on me, and then I have to step in and unwonk them.
So is there a possibility though that some of these terrors, these threatening forces, could actually be something autonomous and not necessarily a cue to bring you into the now?
Autonomous instead of what?
Instead of like a challenge to get you to engage and become aware in the now. Like, could these threatening things actually be entities, or I'm not sure what else, demons, whatever anyone wants to call them.
Entities is a good broad spectrum term.
So do you think that there's, because we talked about that with the astral stuff, but I'm wondering if there's a possibility that you could have picked one up somewhere, say, and then you have to deal with it at some point, some kind of fuckery.
Yeah, I would think that might, I mean, there might be just two things that can be operative that come to my mind. I'm not saying there's only two things. One is that you have a stuck place in your psychology, and by doing it multiple times and 3 times, like basically you have to walk through that healing. You have to solve that terror that's in your subconscious that you're experiencing in your dreams. Okay, that's one.
Yes, and that's the first one I think one should fall on to when you're deducing.
But let's take the archontic branch of entities. There's just a lot of jealousy and envy from their side towards us. So terrorizing us is kind of, what little joy they can milk from their existence. So I don't doubt that if they can manage to insert a thought or pass a thought through somebody's mind while they're in a dream state and freak them out and wake them up and alarm them, I'm quite sure that's good for a few shits and giggles in the Archontic peanut gallery. And I don't doubt it. I mean, so much of what we call evil in this world. See, I don't believe in an existential evil. Because the existential evil has no way of really operating in our world unless it grabs a hold of somebody's psychology and gets those hands to do something shitty. So, yeah, I mean, so that's the whole kind of thing. I mean, from an observer mode, when you're in like, connected with the universe type of thing, evil is just something or what creates evil, you can just kind of see. It's almost like watching a high pressure system and a low pressure system, kind of like, joggling for whatever. It's almost like a natural thing. Now, of course, weather is driven by our emotions. And similarly, I believe other types of things are driven by collective consciousness. So there's almost like a call and response going on with things. It was from the Seth materials. The Seth material was the first time that Seth had posited that weather is created by emotional states. That it actually, in the various high pressure systems they're tied very much in with regional collective emotional states.
Yeah, and that rings. That's got a heavy vibration for me, for sure. Do you think this is? I'm constantly trying to find new ways of presenting this. Do you think that we're having a mass dream? You mentioned the Sophia thing and being part of that.
Yeah, I believe at the environment that we live in, the holographic quantum environment we live in, is within Sophia's dreaming. Now, her dreaming our collective dreaming has been somewhat hacked. In this case, it's almost like hacked, like somebody outside your door with an axe hacking.
Yeah.
And the monotheisms hacked our connection to the earth bad. It took us from being as natural to this planet, as fish and grass and trees, we are nature itself and a part of it, to, the monotheistic systems brought us this original sin, to, worshiping nature is idolatry is. I mean, first of all, and that's even a misunderstanding. The reverence for nature was not worshiping. The rituals that were done on the holidays or the holy days. I don't like to use the word. I'll use holiday. I don't like holy. Were a lot of the rituals were to keep the memory going. The tales were told. You had to keep your ancestral memory going. You had to keep remembering who you were, because if you forgot who you were going forward, you wouldn't know who you were to continue your path. So we still live in the dreaming, but we as a collective dream together, and we got a couple of 2 or 3 billion of us on this planet dreaming some pretty weird shit.
Yes, absolutely.
You made me think of something too while you were talking about. So we're the dream of Sophia, or an extension of her, whatever. We're her creation, right? So there's an energetic, symbiotic relationship there.
With what?
Us and Sophia.
Yes.
And when monotheism came in, everyone's worship and energy went elsewhere. So in one way, they drained her of this energy that was required to even sustain us, perhaps. So I just thought of that thread.
What happened was that primary psychic connection was largely lost. And
Maybe that was maintained by the energetic thing that was there before.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't, for me, I wouldn't even say maybe. For me, that is, I see it. And so I quickly read a chat about all the religions. I mean, again, by the time we're reading history, because history that we now have is short. What we have is recorded history based on, even when we were doing cave painting already, the history is really short. And it's been written to tell the story that the people who've kind of been telling their own story about what we should believe has been going on for a while. So, like, probably the first of the fuckeries was probably Zoroastrianism. And if you can get it, I mean, his history is kind of clouded, but if you realize, you can see the influence coming from the Vedic stuff of India, because don't forget, Iran's there right next to India. And at that time in history is when the Vedas are, and the Hindu system is now introducing the caste system, and which wasn't there. So this whole period, like from 500 BC, 1000 BC, 1500 BC, really the beginning of the age of Aries. The transition from Taurus into Aries is when you could really mark the beginning of the age of Aries as when the nastiness got real. Is when the war gods came to ascendancy.
That's when the Aryans arrived.
And that is written.
The equinoxes.
That's written very interestingly about in Graham Hancock's book Entangled. Pretty interesting fiction he wrote there.
So we've hit the hour mark, and we try to stay on that. But before we go to the chat for questions, I still want I have one more thing to get into, and I want a sense of, I guess I'm coming to you as Mr. Modern Wizard, and I want to see what do you think we can do? So we know that there's some shift happening. There's a sea change afoot. There's something going on. I think that is very clear with everyone these days. What in this dream, through the language you're talking here in this, so the stream of Sophia, what can we do, Radagast? What can we do as a whole, or individuals within the whole, to bring about this change in a nicer, friendlier way, or to ride it out?
Get active. I mean, to me, we are invited into that dreaming because we're supposed to be sharing this dream. It isn't her dreaming her dream and we're stuck in it.
Right.
She was attracted because of us to be with us. So now we want to dream this together, but we can't dream together any more than two people can dream together unless we kind of say, hey, let's dream together.
Yes. So intent.
So we can, first of all, you would have to feel that this planet actually has an intelligence, and there's a whole mythos and a, story to that mythos that connects us not only from Earth and takes us back to the galactic center where we all come from. In many ways, one of the ways I like to do, especially people who are still kind of coming from a little bit of God the Father, and in the Sophianic narrative and what we could call the Gnostic mythology, it starts in the galactic center, and there is what they call the originator. And from the originator come emanations that in the Gnostic term is an aeon. And these different aeons have qualities that have emerged from the originator. They have now been externalized. They've come from that the world of non-being and these emanations then kind of are the taking of these qualities into packages and bringing them into the world of being. And there's a certain autonomous nature to them. So what I like to say sometimes where people, like Sophia, mother, basically this originator we could call the father, even though it's an androgynous. All the beings really are androgynous, including our own spirits.
Yeah,
But
I agree.
You know, we lean, you know, we kind of, you know, it's almost like being left-handed or right-handed.
Yeah.
And so one of the ways I like to sum it up for people who are really doing this, that we're, you know, Sophia is our mother, and for all intents and purposes, for working, for something that's gonna work with you and kind of be in the dirt with you. That is Sophia. But I like to remind everybody, we all come from the same source. In many ways, if you want to do it, you can call it a father, because it did the movement. It's an androgynous being, but the active part would be male.
Mm-hmm.
So this emanating, because it wasn't birth. Emanations are not like we now experience birth. So this doingness is a male doingness. Because it's kind of the female part that was holding on to all this and making it, that sacred space, and it's the male part that starts externalizing this stuff. And these amount to the emanations or the aeons. So basically, we all, Sophia and us, have the same father. In other words, everything starts at the same place, and then it starts populating. And as you start getting into densities and down the population tree, you get to us. And I can say that the main purpose for us is because the gods wanted to taste their reality. They wanted to taste the fruit they put on trees. They wanted to smell jasmine. They wanted
like avatars in a way.
Well, yes. And there was this whole beautiful world God created. Who's going to experience it?
But if they're gods, why can't they?
Because we are them.
But I mean, just from a logical standpoint, if they could create all this, of course they had to know what it tasted like or smelled like. So, I mean, are we just talking about specific tactile and emotional feelings that are only available here?
Yeah, I mean, this whole tactile nerve-based sensuality is very unique to biology. And it's thick and yummy.
Yeah.
And creamy.
And juicy.
And dark and spicy.
Well, it's interesting, Radagast, when you say, when you present it that way, I cannot help but avoid this gaming reality where you design a world, like say Second Life or The Sims. You design this world, and the only way to really experience it is to get into an avatar and experience the world through the avatar. Even though as the designer, or as at least knowing the designers or being part of the designing, we're throwing trees here, we're throwing houses here, we're doing this, but you don't experience them until you actually embody an avatar. And so somehow that linked up in my head with the densities through. I sorry to take it to a digital experience, but I couldn't. It really overlaps for me.
But the difference being that in a Second Life scenario, you don't really experience what's going on there physically. You just experience it mentally.
Right. It's all mental, but a matter of how much you engage mentally. And now, especially with, like, say, Oculus Rift and 3D immersion, it is becoming more dense.
We should talk about this after the show, because there's a TV show from the 80s that actually discusses AI, I'm sorry, not AI, VR goggles, or an immersive VR experience combined with a drug that's like in the water.
Oh, cool. We'll save that for the after show. Yeah. But I just had to say that I'm not sure if you'd ever played with Second Life or any of that, but that idea really resonated with me, of experience the gods, or the whatever, this density that we're in, as it's resonated down into where we are, is I can latch on to that. I sense it. I've got a real sense of it.
All right, we're ready for some questions. I have two or three. Yeah, no, yes.
Yeah,
I'm ready.
Okay, sorry. All right, so Robert Paul asked, have you ever experienced a shadow person?
No. I'm not saying they haven't been around me. Other people have reported seeing them. now and again.
People you know or trust, you mean?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
And wait, just to follow up on that, what do you make of them?
They're probably jinn.
Yeah.
And because, I mean, one of the things I've done as a passive magical approach is know the 4 basic elementals and what they like.
Mm-hmm.
And so therefore you cultivate a relationship with them. And the jinn, because of how much we use fire, and because fire can be friend or foe. Over the years, I've built up a really good relationship. Let's call them the fire spirits, okay? The fire elementals, which I think the jinn are part of. And so by showing respect, because again, I've done this a few times. Here's a lighter, okay?
Yes.
Now that living flame there, that's a living flame.
Yes.
That's a lot.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And all I had to do was flick a bic, and there it is. All right. Thank you. So I remember, not all the time, but many times, to thank flame for being there.
Mm-hmm.
It's an appreciation for something because of all the elements of the 4, solid elements. Fire is the one that we can invoke and almost put at our command at the flick of your thumb.
Yeah, that is.
All right.
Excellent.
So if you don't, so imagine being a being that can be called into somebody else's reality like this and not being appreciated for it.
Very good.
I'm just talking about appreciation. Just the same thing. If your neighbor did something for you, you're not worshiping your neighbor. You're thanking them. Thanks. That was cool.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been in a few cases where things, cats knock things into fires, where it was cat. Almost every case, it was cats. And their fuckery.
Oh,
and but there's a few cases where a bad fire should have broken out, and instead it was smoldered so long that I could smell it, find it, and deal with it almost effortlessly.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, this is because the fire spirits contain themselves because they're friends of mine.
Yes.
We respect each other. Where somebody else who shows no respect and the fire's going, it's like, it's elementals are wild and feral. They're quite feral. They're not evil, but they're feral, man.
Yes, absolutely.
They're like
I'm with
raccoons.
you. I walk with that myself, with all the elements too, when I'm near water. And I think this is why I've not I'll see houses around mine flood out, and I'm out there with my trees, and somehow I'm always fine because I'm talking with the elements. Does it seem crazy? Not to me. It seems like I'm actually aware and having a communication and a relationship with the world around me, and it starts with the elements.
Yes, I mean the earth. I mean usually, for anybody, if I'll do a quick little primer. Basically, the earth spirits kind of like gemstones and things like that. Water spirits actually like nicely scented waters. I like rose water, blossom water.
Yes.
But I mean, again, not stuff with those synthetic stinks in them.
No, the real stuff.
Yeah, So those are nice little things. And again, these are ways of kind of setting up your own intent and also showing appreciation. Okay, so the air is incense, and fire just largely likes to be respected. I mean, you burn incense and fire, but fire for me largely just wants to be respected for the fact that it's basic. Fire is our slave.
Yes.
And
this is all literally ties into Nox Mente. By what you just said, though, these are all cues to being in the now, cues to lucidity, whatever the experience we're having is. By acknowledging the elements, the pharaoh elements, you are coming into a nowness.
Oh yeah, candles, of course, candles for fire. And then, of course, to me, one of the important things is why I always have a snuffer.
Yes.
Is there's a certain respect. If you don't let the candle burn out and you're going to put it out, there's a kind of a way of showing some respect for, again, here's this living being. You called it up when you wanted it. Now it's like, I'm done with you. All right. So this is like a way of kind of like, thank you for, for your service, for being friendly. And a lot of it's the intent. Like sometimes if I don't have it and I want to blow something out, I cup it in my hand and kind of lovingly say, thank you.
I just put a little spit on my fingers and allow it.
That's another one, because you're, which works fine, because the whole thing is you're taking your flesh and putting it in the fire.
Yes.
You're always impressed by that.
Yes, absolutely.
It's like, because fire knows it has teeth.
Oh, absolutely. It's a wonderful experience working with fire.
And of course, building a campfire is always a nice thing to do.
Making any kind of fire is a good thing to do.
And
I've always had to have fireplaces.
And letting it
everywhere
die naturally is a nice way for it to go.
Oh, definitely. Isn't it wonderful? And listening to once you get into that Pythian or Sibyllian way, where you're finding a way of scrying. Fire is such a wonderful thing. The way logs will pop and crack when you're asking questions, or it talks to you. You really can get into a conversation. Again, this is talking about lucidity and altered states of consciousness.
Or is it just focused awareness too?
But isn't that what we're talking about when we talk about dreams, trying to get, when we have this opportunity. And I think the biggest thing is always kind of be here now. Be here now is such a big thing. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, however you've dissipated throughout all that is, be here now somehow conjures your own flame up.
And generally, I mean, so often, especially like sometimes I go into a meditation because, I need to get balanced again. And one of the things about being here now is like, if you're like in a troubled place and you can go into your nice room and light an incense and have some quiet, life is fucking good. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And so more and more, sometimes when I'm like in this stuff and I turn, the first thing I do is, wait a second, I have time and the space to actually do what I need to do in the moment.
Yes.
Life is good. Life is good. For me, again, I mean, and that's for the most important thing is, if you can be in the power that you can get from, if your life is good enough and you can tell yourself life is good, especially since most parts of the day, nobody's shooting at you. Right. Generally, you're not living under a bridge. I mean, there's so many things that we take for granted that if you just stop in that moment and you go, this is really okay.
Yes.
I mean, there's a lot of crap out there. The world sucks. In my moment, in the space I've created and I find myself in at this moment, thank you. This is good shit, man. This is okay.
Isn't that part of what I was asking? Like, what can we do? And I think that's for me, that's one of the things that I and especially the older I get, I'm finding myself pausing more often and being, I don't know if the word is trigger warning for people, but grateful. I find myself so often in this state of gratitude of,
are you blessed?
That I am blessed, child. That I have created a beautiful place in space and time for myself, and that serves its purpose, my needs for beauty and safety and security, where things are blooming and fruiting and alive. And so I don't take it for granted. And I think this is building on a larger sense of lucidity, or I feel like I'm opening a gate somehow by this state of mind, which is now plays. I think that's all started for me in dream world or in dream time, and then it somehow spills over into whatever this is. And so that's what I'm saying ultimately is, yes, Radagast, I agree.
I actually have that written down as a topic for afterwards. So.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, that's one thing I wanted to explore is co-creation in Dreamtime. But we have one more question from Robert again. Was are you affiliated with any magic groups or organizations?
I would say no, even though I am a lapsed master mason, but there wasn't any magic really going on in those things either. I guess I should say I'm starting to. I've been a solitaire most of my life. Two things. One, kind of like the tradition I come from is a solitary tradition. And then also kind of forced into solitude by, that's where the most coherence was. But now I'm starting to meet some new people that I'm able to start co-creating in that space with. And I'm meeting it in this little community of ours. And the reason I'm now able to do it is because the people I'm meeting are up to it. There's a lot of claims out there. There's a whole lot of Corey Gooden going on out there. But so it's kind of, I need, for me to work with people, I need to work with people it's like being a musician. I like to work with people with a good sense of timing, a good ear, generally know how to play together. There's an art to doing things together. There's an art to being a team. And so I'm now finding I'm starting to find some people I consider to be team members. So although up until very recently, I have not worked with any groups, that's going to be changing. And I can tell that's changing now and will be changing more in the future.
Great. Thank you. That's a great answer. I think that's all the questions that we got. So I think we'll wrap it up, take it offline. And thank you very much, everyone, for watching. Thank you, Radagast, for joining us. It was a fascinating conversation. And
thank you.
We will see you all next week with Aaron David from Charm the Water podcast. If you're unfamiliar with his podcast, you should check it out. It's pretty interesting. And he's excited to come on, so we're looking very much forward to that. So anyway,
can I do a little promotion before we go out?
Absolutely. Oh, I'm so sorry about that. Please.
There will be another Mystic and the Moose going. We'll be making one. We probably usually get finished around midnight on Friday nights, and then it's up a few hours. So
I'm a big fan of that, by the way, Radagast.
Well, thank you, Speculum. Or Niche. So we're doing another one this Friday. So I just wanted to kind of promo it a little bit.
Yeah, drop on by. So is that going to be? I've only listened to those in after. Do they do live? Are they live?
No, we record them on.
Okay.
We have our meeting and then I put them up.
Okay.
So then you could be on the Hive. Good.
And definitely check out Modwiz's channel, Modwiz125. Mystic Brews, one of my favorite things to listen to.
There's been less of them lately because ever since I've been going through this really intense download, upload, change, whatever, it's been hard to keep up with.
You've been addressing that too.
Yeah, it's been, every once in a while, you know what it is? It's what I'm finding sometimes is I don't know where to start. And every once in a while I get brave and I put on the mic, put on the camera, and I find someplace. And
that's what you've been saying. Okay, so well, thank you everyone for joining us. And I love you all in the chat. You're all great.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.